All right, let's talk about a song. It was written way back in 1963, but honestly, it feels like it could have been written yesterday. We're going to deconstruct Bob Dylan's With God on Our Side, a song that is just a timeless, sharp critique of how leaders use this idea of moral certainty to justify, well, just about anything. And as we're going to see, the exact same patterns Dylan was warning us about are popping up again in modern politics, especially in the rhetoric of figures like Donald Trump, who so often frames these political fights in terms of, divine will. So yeah, let's get into it.
So Dylan kicks things off with a narrator who could be literally anyone, an everyman from the heartland, right? And this is so important. This song isn't about some fringe extremist. It's about the quiet, everyday process of being taught what to believe. It's the story of a voter who is raised to think their own national identity is just inherently good, inherently righteous. A belief that, political figures can then come along and very, very easily exploit.
And boom, right away, Dylan cuts straight to the heart of it. This isn't a belief system someone actively chose. It's one they were handed. The narrator was taught and brought up to accept this one simple, powerful idea, that his country has God on its side. And this, right here, is the absolute foundation of the kind of religious nationalism we see today. This idea that your patriotism and your faith are basically the same thing.
So what we're really talking about is this concept, moral certainty. It's that unshakable belief that your side is the good side, and that everything you do is justified by God or by your country. This is the exact tool that someone like Trump uses when he claims he's fighting for Christian values or defending the nation's soul. It completely changes the game. It turns a political disagreement into a holy war, a battle of good versus evil. And when you do that, well, compromise becomes impossible and cruelty can start to look permissible.
Okay, so how do you maintain that kind of certainty? Well, it's all about the stories you tell. The history books, as Dylan says, tell it so well. They create this clean, simple, heroic story. And that kind of sanitized history is absolutely critical for nationalism. It lets you just erase the ugly parts, the past brutalities, the racial violence, and allows a country to see itself as chosen by God. And that's a narrative that political leaders can then use for whatever they want. So then Dylan takes us on this pretty grim tour of American history, all seen through this lens of righteous war. The song just ticks off one war after another, not as horrible tragedies, but as this proud string of victories. This whole mindset that constant conflict is proof of your national strength in God's favor is a real cornerstone of that Make America Great Again ideology, which so often seems to glorify a past that was defined by military power.
I mean, just look at the language here. It's so brutally simple. The cavalry's charged, the Indians died. The genocide of indigenous peoples is just presented as an unavoidable thing that happens when a young country grows. This is moral certainty at its absolute most chilling. It reframes horrific racial violence as just a necessary step in a plan that was blessed by God. And you can see echoes of that today, right? When certain rhetoric is used to dehumanize immigrants or other groups, framing their mistreatment as somehow necessary for national security or purity. And this line, this is the gut punch of Dylan's whole critique. You don't count the dead when God's on your side. See, moral certainty works like a moral anesthetic. It lets a leader completely ignore the human cost of their policies. It doesn't matter if it's families being separated at a border or citizens dying from a pandemic that's been mismanaged. If you frame the cause as a holy one, as a fight for the nation's very soul, then the victims just become acceptable collateral damage.
And this is just brilliant because it shows how God's will can be such a convenient political tool. After World War II, the Germans, who, as he says, murdered 6 million, are suddenly our allies. And just like that, God is on their side too. It's the same kind of political opportunism we see all the time. One minute a foreign leader is a monster, the next he's a key ally in some new fight. God's favor just seems to shift to whoever suits the political story of the day.
Okay, so now the song makes this huge pivot. It moves from the past to its present, which was the Cold War. And Dylan shows how this same dangerous logic is being applied to a brand new reality, one where the stakes are literally global annihilation. And you see the same thing today when this kind of rhetoric is used to justify really extreme positions on issues that are framed as these existential threats to the nation.
And you can just feel the terrifying escalation here. The weapons have gone from guns in their hands to weapons of the chemical dust. He's talking about nuclear fallout. The tools have become these instruments of total worldwide destruction. But the simple, self-righteous thinking behind using them, that hasn't changed one bit. And this is what it all leads to. The same cozy, comfortable moral certainty that justified all those wars in the past is now being used to justify wiping out the entire planet. The logic hasn't evolved, even though the weapons have, massively. And that's the danger when you have powerful leaders who talk about things like fire and fury, and they're operating with this unshakable belief that they are on the side of the angels. And here it is. This is the final lock on the cage. You never ask questions when God's on your side. Moral certainty demands blind, unquestioning obedience. It's the ultimate weapon for silencing anyone who disagrees with you, for calling journalism fake news, and for dismissing any and all criticism as just an attack from the enemy, from the unholy. It's designed to shut down any questions. So, after building up this entire fortress of righteous justification, Dylan does something amazing. He introduces one single question that's so powerful it threatens to bring the whole thing crashing down. He shifts from the political right into the theological, and he forces us, the listeners, to confront the very foundation of what we believe. The narrator just asks, did Judas have God on his side? And that one question just shatters the whole simple story of good versus evil. Because if history's most famous traitor could have believed he was doing the right thing, then couldn't anyone? Couldn't the people we label as our enemies? It forces you to take a hard look at anyone who claims to have absolute moral authority, because chances are their opponents believe the exact same thing about themselves. So after a question like that, where do you go? Where does that shattering realization leave our narrator? Let's take a look at the song's ending to see how this journey from absolute certainty to total confusion wraps up.
You know, the result isn't some new, better belief system. It's just profound confusion. Once that comforting lie of moral certainty is stripped away, all you're left with is the messy, complicated truth. And that disillusionment, that confusion, is the painful but necessary first step toward any kind of real understanding and away from the simple stories that political opportunists want to sell you.
And the song ends on this haunting, incredible challenge. It completely flips the whole premise on its head. If God is truly on our side, he says, then God will stop the next war. It suggests that any version of faith, any appeal to a higher power that leads to more conflict, more division, more cruelty, is a total perversion of that faith. It's the ultimate rebuke to any political leader who wraps themselves up in religion just to justify aggression. And Dylan's question from 1963 is still the most important one we can ask of our leaders today. Is your version of God a justification for war, or is it a reason for peace?